What is up, fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Favale coming at you with my certified fantabulous, dripping with fantabulousness thermonuclear AF co-host of the number one NBA podcast in the business, Hardwood Knocks. He is Mr. Grant Hughes. The reviews are in. No podcast is more personable or thorough. We were the only podcast to do a postseason preview. Look ahead. That's real shit. This podcast is just so great. We are here, the long-awaited teaser. As I mentioned, we are going to do playoff content. We're going to do an analysis later this week, but you are going to be inundated with that. So we're going to do some big picture stuff too. And so Grant and I are going to take a look back at one thing each of us got wrong for every NBA team. He has the Western Conference. I have the Eastern Conference. We will be chiming in wherever, appropriate, like me on the West, him on the East, of course. But we're excited to do this. We've been teasing it for a while. I'm excited. I have energy. Recording during the day. That's fucking weird.
Yeah.
But the question that people actually want to know the answer to, Grant, as the co-host of the number one NBA podcast in the business that is just teeming with self-belief at the moment, how the heck are you?
I didn't know the numbers were in. I'm not surprised, but I didn't hear about the numbers.
Honestly, we broke the metric gauge because they basically emailed me saying they don't have the capacity to count that high.
Because we don't do it for recognition. We do it for the love. And it's, like
I'm in this for the clout.
It's just
we've got like dozens of people who are downloading this episode right now. I'm in it for the clout.
I think you should make like ridiculous claims like that part of the intro, just as a staple. Just we're number one in whatever. And just like eventually we live in a world where you can like make anything so if you say it enough, like, right? Like truth is very flimsy these days. So you can just say a thing.
I don't know if I want to be part of advancing.
You're not advancing it. You're just riding the wave. Like it works.
This did make me think very quickly. I said something that in retrospect was, I mean, by our standards, it was kind of arrogant. The people wanted to see the full results of our like over unders, but I had said it, and I don't know if it was in Discord or if I said it, I might have said it multiple times where someone DM'd me, and I was just like, I didn't want to publish the full results because I don't want to put the person who had the worst record on blast to just thousands of people. And I was just like, now I'm thinking, I was like, that was really arrogant.
Why is that arrogant? What are you talking about? You don't want to expose someone for doing a bad job
relative to other podcasts, maybe do tens of thousands or whatever. But it's just like, that was just such a weird, like all right, how about this? From the way that we frame this podcast is like more self-deprecating or not like seriously unserious for me to just be like, yeah, like we didn't want like the thousands of people, like that mass amount of crowds downloading that episode to know that so-and-so went, 8 games under 500 in the win-loss totals.
I mean, neither of us did all that well. So
I had the second to work. I was tired for the second last word.
No, you're coming at that from a good place. Like that's not wanting to unnecessarily make someone feel bad. What's wrong?
No, but it was the phrasing. Okay. Whereas sorry, my gold shoes are like really tight. That was like by my standards, that was me kind of saying.
Yeah. No, I mean, when you're the number one podcast,
you poo-pooed over an $80 million contract on the last episode. Our Discord members were irate that you were making more than that to record that podcast.
Whatever, man. You get what you're worth. All right, we should start. We're gonna go alphabetically because we couldn't decide on a better route. So we're gonna be jumping back and forth between conferences, but whatever. Any further preamble notes, or should we just get this is just like what happened that we did not expect? Like when
for me, it was, and by the way, we tried to make this two things. We did this not up, we're prepped, but like this is not like Dan and Grant wrote monologues on every single team.
It's a lightning round.
We have 3 minutes per team. I'm sure we'll go over at some point. Maybe we'll go under for certain ones. And then I also framed as like, if there were things that I actively know that I said or wrote and were just completely off base. So some of these there are receipts for, if anyone cares to try and go find them.
I'm sure there are receipts for mine, and I did not look them up because I don't like to live.
It's okay. I have receipts on all 30 teams. You were wrong about every single team, and I have all the receipts.
Odds are probably, like, just from a sheer volume perspective, I'm sure I said multiple wrong things about every team.
It's one of the long paper memes. You ever seen the SpongeBob gif where he like unfurls the paper and it's like going and going? Like that would be if we went back and revisited all our takes from the season. Imagine like we've probably adjusted our priors and initial takes without ever acknowledging so many of them. I know we do acknowledge when we're about to do some, sort of pay the pipe ring here, but there's just so many things that we've just said that.
What are you gonna do? We're all just trying to figure it out.
I apologize to the tens of millions of people listening to this.
Yeah. Sorry, all you guys. We'll do better.
Okay, so anything else, or are we actually ready to get off now?
I think we're ready.
Well, that was poor phrasing. Let's go to the Atlanta Hawks. We're already off to a great start with the alphabet. So I hit their over. This is just this is my way of saying I thought the Hawks were going to be better, and I thought specifically that we were going to see a much different version of Trae Young. And I know that he moved away from the ball a little bit more. You could dig into it and look at the share of his shots that went assisted. They were higher than they were in recent seasons, but not by a great deal. And he still wasn't finishing plays as a cutter or kind of flying around screens off the ball. And I thought once Quinn Snyder was installed and that he had a training camp and an off season to with this team, I really expected them. They did look different, but it still felt like DeJounte Murray and Trae Young were too often operating independent of each other. And I just expected, this dates back. I don't know if I celebrated the trade when they made it, but I was okay with what they gave up to get DeJounte Murray. I thought it could work. They were minus 6.3 points or whatever it was per 100 possessions with those two on the floor. One of them has to be traded. For me, it would be Murray. We differ on sort of the Trae Young aspect of it, but this just clearly isn't going to work. And I had hope that it would. And even I'm at the point where I do think that, there were some injuries that Yucca Okongwu dealt with a bunch. And I think this roster is definitely imperfect for what you need around those two. Even by those standards, it's just clear that it's not happening. And it does raise the question of, and this is as someone who is, I think I would keep Trae Young, but can he actually play materially different enough to make any sort of pairing with another star actually work?
Yeah, I don't have a lot. I would just echo that I was on board with the thinking that we're going to get a full year with Quinn Snyder running his system, which we liked so much in Utah offensively, some really good offenses in Utah with some fairly limited personnel. So surely with Trae Young, this thing's going to work. It felt like maybe now going forward, you say the Hawks don't have the benefit of the doubt necessarily, with, all the pieces will fit together. It's we've seen Trae Young play a certain way for long enough that it's so now what? Yeah. We don't need to get into it, but I'm more of the mind, you should trade Trae Young. I think I'm more comfortable with that. But I just thought that the Quinn Snyder thing was he's a really good coach. He had a ton of success with the Jazz. First full season, the Hawks are going to win 47, 48 games or something, and it just was way off.
He was my coach of the year pick, so I was wrong about that preseason. And the other thing, just very quickly, does the way that Luka Doncic has played with Kyrie Irving and kind of increased his pace as well, does that lend itself to giving you hope? Even seeing kind of Harden for part of the season, with the Clippers anyway, they made, it feels more wholesale shifts in their functionalities. Does that give you hope or make you less confident that Trae Young is going to be just because James Harden's this late into his career and was able to do it?
Yeah. I mean, Harden didn't do it till he had to, I feel so that's kind of a different situation. And I don't know. I guess I really just thought it was going to happen this year where we were going to see a different look, and it didn't really in a meaningful way. So now I'm not going to go into next year expecting the same, the things that I did this year, right? Now it's going to be, I'll be wrong if Quinn Snyder finally gets the system installed and Trae Young and DeJounte Murray and the rest of the roster work well together. I'll just go in saying that will not happen, and then I'll be wrong if it does. That I've flipped my baseline a little bit.
There are definitely receipts on this one for the Boston Celtics from me, and I was not high on the Kristaps Porzingis trade at all. And I did recognize once you got Jrue Holiday that it changed the calculus a little bit. I did not adjust my prior on that nearly enough. That has been just, this roster looks utterly dominant. And I think even the offensive concerns are just mostly overblown. They are a bottom 10 team in one possession games in the final 3 minutes where it's a head or tied. So things do bog down. But the top six on this roster, and you could throw Sam Hauser giving them good minutes, Peyton Pritchard, they've done some, they are so good. They are so dominant that you're at the point where if they don't come out of the East, it's a disappointment. That's how good they are. And Kristaps Porzingis was that good of a fit. I thought he did a good job on the court of blending in, but then also taking opportunities to punish mismatches, which is really the Wizards were throwing him the ball and asking him to create more and feeding him his even when he didn't have mismatches. And with the Celtics, it's like, no, like that's the only time that you're going to do that. So he's come in healthier for the most part than I expected, even though he wound up not qualifying for any of the awards ballots. But he's a perfect fit on offense, playing fantastic defense, where I think, had he played more, he might have made some all defense ballots as well. So I was worried that, one, the health perspective, and that he wouldn't be he's coming off this career year on the Wizards, who were just so nondescript and irrelevant. I was like, well, is that going to translate to a really good team? It did. And then I was arguing there was still going to be this playmaking deficit in Boston, even after getting Jrue Holiday. And look, in some moments, I think you can feel it, but between Jrue Holiday, Jason Tatum, Derek White, and just the Jaylen Brown counters on offense, not the passing, and even just Al Horford kind of sprinkle, like they have enough. And so this is a team that if they go up against the Nuggets, I'm picking the Nuggets. If they go up against anybody else, you pick them. I just don't know how you pick against them if they're facing any team other than the Nuggets is where I'm at. And so I hit their under, they slaughtered that. So I was just way off on this team.
Well, I would say, like, I think going in, again, I don't have the receipts, but I think I said, like, this trade raises the floor and lowers the ceiling, because you're pricing in Porzingis injury risk. You're pricing in, like, the whole, like, he's the best post-up player against switches, and we're going to hunt that and make that a staple of our offense, and it's, like, unsolvable. Didn't see that coming necessarily. But, yeah, I think, like, they just hit the ceiling, right? Because they had pretty good health across the board. The pieces fit. The bench guys did, probably better than most people expected. And, like, none of the floor stuff, none of the low floor things happened. Like, Jrue Holiday didn't suddenly look like someone in his mid-30s and, like, get way worse. Like, his role diminished, but it was, like, kind of by design. And Porzingis didn't really get hurt in a way that, like, compromised the whole season. And Al Horford held up decently enough. And like all the ceiling stuff happened and none of the floor stuff happened in a big way. So it's like, that was kind of my outlook on it. It looks better for me because I thought, like, the ceiling's high. Like, this could really work, and it did. But I don't think I was confident that, like, this is without risk. Like, the risk factors were just higher, changing last year's team the way they did. 4 rotation guys for 2, basically. So, I'll take a small victory lap there, but I'll take.
You were definitely closer to on the right side of history with the Celtics than I was.
Well, we'll see how they do here. Brooklyn's next. What do you got for Brooklyn?
They're, speaking of nondescript, probably one of the least enjoyable teams to follow this season, and they have a lot of players that I love. I expected their defense to be better. It was basically bottom 10 in points allowed per possession. I expected specifically, I did not think that this was a team that was going to get, let's say, blasted when it came to transition defense, and like they did. And like opponents were just able to run on them off of live rebounds, and that becomes a real problem because they weren't some world-beating defensive rebounding team. They finished around league average in that. I thought we were going to see more of a leap from Mikal Bridges. I do think between some of the injuries, the secondary creation setup, you look at, I think he still had a really good season, but like not feeling him as much defensively is that a byproduct of the offensive workload? And I would argue, look, the offensive workload was heavy, but it wasn't astronomical this season. And so what does that do to adjust your priors on what Mikal Bridges can be in a situation where he's not your third or fourth best player, but you need him to be your first or your top, one of your top 2? The ship on him being the best player on a really good team is sailed. That's over with. The door was open a little bit. I don't know about number 2. I'd probably lean towards no. He just can't. And that's not a problem. I'm just saying I thought he could be. I was on this podcast and said, even with the efficiency issues in the playoffs last year, I was like, no, like this dude is it. I was wrong on that. And the other thing I was wrong on, because I got so much wrong with this team, is I really thought that they would have the foresight to make moves geared towards the future, irrespective of their draft pick situation being owed to Houston. And they clearly didn't. Not only did they not do that, but they had the opportunity to get some of their picks back. And I don't know what I would do in that. I want to be honest. The optics of just trading Mikal Bridges to get Jalen Green and most of your own picks back just doesn't like do it for me. And now I question, like, with what Sean Marks has said, like he just said like some really 2010 era Knicks shit at a press conference where it was stars want to come here. Like, you don't rebuild through free agency, motherfucker, anymore.
Yeah,
that's not how that happens. And so if you're not going to get stars in free agency, which one, they need to clean up their books if they want to do that. So are they going to be a team that like just goes all in to get Trae Young? And then it's, well, where does Trae Young and Mikal Bridges get you? Are you better than this year's version of the Atlanta Hawks? I don't know. I had higher hopes for individuals for their defense, for Mikal Bridges, who I'm not disappointed in, but I missed on him. But the overarching direction of the Nets, it just feels like they lack either a self-awareness of where they are, or they're just so don't want to go through the process of like, we don't have our own pick. We can't do this again. And so unless we're flipping Mikal Bridges for our own picks, what's the point?
Yeah. I thought mainly that this defense was going to be really good. Like I thought Claxton would be better. You got Dennis Smith Jr. I thought Ben Simmons would, if he was going to play, he would at least be helpful defensively. There was a scenario where you could have just the longest, rangiest, like most active 5-man groups out there. Those never materialized. Like, Cam Johnson wasn't quite as good as I was hoping he'd be. And then
with him, I at least think it was very much injury related, like all the hamstring stuff.
But I mean, that ties into just like, if you could put these rangy defensive lineups on there, and also you have, Johnson out there hitting threes and not sacrificing any size or switchability. Like there was, I don't know, even now as I'm talking about it, it's like, oh man, how are they? That should have worked, or at least that should have worked a little bit defensively. And then I thought, if things don't go well, you're going to get something for Dorian Finney-Smith, because he, I'm still hung up on Dallas DFS and like how valuable he was, and that's just not who he is anymore. Like, oh, you could flip, so, and I thought Lonnie Walker was a great sign. There's all these things that just didn't quite break right for them.
The Charlotte Hornets, I know this is a joint. We were wrong and we're sorry. We thought taking Brandon Miller was an all-time misstep by them. And it wasn't even because we didn't think Scoot and LaMelo could operate together, though maybe that would have been a conversation you need to have down the line. People are trying to make that conversation happen with Miller and LaMelo, and I can't get there.
Yeah.
Brandon Miller was the right choice at number 2. And he's not going to finish number 2 in Rookie of the Year because Chet, who's not a member of this draft class, will get it. He absolutely deserves to be number 3. I think the workload he shouldered, I know what Jaime Jaquez and Pods and Case and Wallace did, but like you look at Brandon Miller, the mid-range jumper was like 47% on pull-up twos. That's a great number for a rookie. Hitting his catch and shoot threes at basically a 40% clip. They tried to, because they needed to, explore his depth as a playmaker. I don't really know what that's going to look like, but you know what? He was able to create better separation and get to his spots as a scorer than I expected. And then defensively, wasn't just, there was difficult assignments, but like, and he could fall asleep off the ball. Like there are low lights that you go look at, but if he's defending someone who's going to be involved in the primary action, his work begins before they ever get the ball, and he will fight to deny it to them. He will fight once he's on it. I also think he did some really good stuff as a rotator, as a low man. I think I told you this. He finished in the top 30 or top 35 of total shots contested at the rim this year. That is, that stands out because like, that's something where it's like, you're just in among the trees. And then like some of these smaller ball fives, I look at him, maybe Scoot still winds up having the better career, but like that clearly was not the no-brainer that everybody thought it was, but including us. Yeah,
right. I think, and Miller too, like, imagine if this wasn't, because normally if a rookie defensively isn't like tripping on his shoelaces and like, falling into the stands for no reason defensively, like, well, that's pretty good. But like this year we had incredible defensive performances by a bunch of rookies. If this were a normal year and Miller had defended this way, it'd be like, is this the best wing defender we've ever seen in a rookie class? Like, that's hyperbole, but like he is done a disservice by the fact that there just also happened to be a bunch of other rare, really good defensive rookies. So yeah, he looks like the right pick now. I still am not giving up on Scoot, but like we were way too far in the other direction of like, this is malpractice. Like what is happening? How do you just like, I think the takeaway for me, I don't know how you want to change your behavior, but I'm just not going to have strong takes on draft picks anymore. Like there's no upside in it, right? Like we can't know enough until we see like a full season.
Just because I want our millions of listeners to know right now that we're still going to have strong takes, you have to skew them positive. Where people throw out these offhanded comments that this is probably something you said, J-Dub is a top 10 player, but they won't rank the players because they've named 15 top 10 players in the league right now. That's just what you need to do. And look, I think here's where this is the best way I think to frame it is that we're fast forward a year, and based off what happened as rookies, that you could say, if you want to take a risk with Scoot at number 2 now in a redraft because you want to bet on the long-term upside, I get it. There is no argument for taking him over Brandon Miller based off what happened this season. And that is not something like a spot I thought we'd end up in.
No, not at all. That's a good way to frame it. All right, Chicago. We got another.
Still me for some reason. The Chicago Bulls. So I'm going to do a quick victory lap here. The Bulls are exactly who I thought they were. And it's like they didn't blow it up, even though I wanted them to. They weren't good enough to really make any noise. DeMar DeRozan was still doing things. He was probably a little bit better in the clutch than I expected. But I was clearly wrong, and I'm assuming everybody was, that Kobe White was going to enter the most improved player discussion. It's even if you sort of caked in, you knew Lonzo wasn't going to play. Did we think Zach LaVine was going to miss most of the year? Like, did you ever think the opportunity would be available for him to do that? But then the improvement that he actually made as a passer, kind of a game manager, someone creating off the dribble, and then still being this massive threat as a catch and shoot guy. I never thought when they signed him to that contract last year, I thought it was fine. It was not like, it was kind of along the lines of, it's not the same trajectory, but you remember when Steph signed his extension, what was it, like 4 years and $44 million? People were like, whoa, that might've been too much. Mm-hmm. And with Kobe White, it was different, where it was, oh, that's fine. But now it's just turned into one of the best bargains in the league. And I could not have projected that coming. And I would also argue, this is definitely what I didn't see coming. There's a chance, and I would have said there's a 0% chance. So that's what I was wrong about, that the Bulls just have their backcourt of the future with, or at least their backcourt to sit on for a while if they want to be good or not fuck things up, with Kobe White and Ayo Dosunmu, who you knew I was high on Ayo Dosunmu, but like he even kind of, after some of the injuries, they forced him to level up as a scorer. I think that's going to serve him well long term. That's a bright spot for this team that probably doesn't necessarily deserve them. If you're a fan, I think you almost latch on to the idea like, okay, I'm glad they didn't make it out of the play-in, because maybe this just forces them, with DeRozan hitting free agency, to kind of take a look in the mirror and, okay, now we're finally going to start pulling back, tearing this down. They're not going to do that because it's the Bulls. But
yeah, I definitely thought coming into the season, it was one of the most hopeless situations in the league for all the reasons you laid out. Like, they just refused to pick it, to not try to win 42 games or whatever it is. And that's still mostly true, but because White and Dosunmu did what they did, like, I don't know if you call them outs. Like, I don't know if either of those guys is good enough to where it's like, oh, well, at least they have, like, they'll be very good because they have these guys. It's like, you do have young, cost controlled, bargain, starting caliber guards, which is like, that's a lot more flexibility than I thought this team was going to have. Like, it's not, like, it's still pretty cloudy. Like, the outlook is gray, but it's not hopeless to me anymore, because, you're really, if depending on how they operate this offseason, like LaVine and Vucevic are bad contracts probably, but it's not, you just having those two other young guys on cheap deals to offset that just changes the overall complexion of the roster. That
is something I was wrong about, by the way. Just legitimately wrong about it. I thought they signed Vooch to a 3-year, $80 million deal when it happened. And I was like, what the hell? And then once I realized that I misread it and it was 60, I was like, oh, okay. I like talked myself into it. It says a lot. Bad. It says a lot about this team, though, that I think for most teams, this isn't, we were wrong by omission, because that's what this is with Kobe White. It's like, we just didn't say this or see it coming.
Right.
It wasn't, we had this strong take against or about. That just sums it up for the Bulls in general.
Yeah. Right.
Hey, it's still me.
Yeah,
the Cleveland Cavaliers. So this is going to be one of my spicier ones. And we know that I think I've been, at least when we've talked about this, I've been more on board of playing it out and thinking they can still get there. Maybe they can. And I'm not saying you absolutely do this. The playoffs are happening. They're beating up on the Magic as we record this. They're up 2-0. This core four isn't going to work. It's not they need to trade Jared Allen. It's not even they need to trade Donovan Mitchell because he wants out. It's not they need to trade Evan Mobley or look at Darius Garland. It's even when they're at their best, there's the risk of the offense sticking. And it's good that Evan Mobley's explored some of the 3-point stuff. It's good that you can run stuff with him and Jared Allen. The problem is whether you're catering to that or you're still running most of the stuff through one of your premier guards where, okay, that's going to leave one of them to space the floor, and then you're going to have one of the bigs that you can use as the primary screener. Someone's always going to be marginalized or left out in the cold here. And the more I see the Cavs offense, the more I believe that, even on some of the good nights, because it's not just people focus on the two big stuff, but it's if you're going to do stuff with Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, well, then like you're marginalizing both or at least one of your guards as part of that action. And I just don't, for what they need to, it's no, like there needs to be more of a wing here. It's great that they found Max Strus. Isaac Okoro had a good year. Karis LeVert was in the 6th man of the year conversation. This team, Dean Wade, before he was dealing with knee stuff, was like a really good, like big wing defender and was hitting his threes, and we kind of forgot about him. Like, he dealt with shoulder stuff last year, and we were like, oh, look at what happened to Dean Wade. He's done. I don't think we said that, but they like, and maybe it's, even if you want to make it less about, well, what can this core four do together? And it's, no, we still kind of need to get this functional equilibrium with an actual wing that is just doesn't have as many limitations or question marks as an Isaac Okoro or even just a Max Strus. It's like, I'm kind of sitting here wondering, and I don't like, I want to see how the postseason goes, but I'm going to phrase it this way. I was dead set on this team being like, they're next up in the East, like after the Celtics. And I'm so confident in this core four. I'm not as confident anymore, to where, depending on how the playoffs end, I'd entertain doing something dramatic where it's like, what if you could get Mikal Bridges for Darius Garland or Evan Mobley? And maybe you're getting other stuff if you're giving up Mobley for Mikal Bridges. Isn't that something? Like, because this is the guy they decided with Mobley that wasn't supposed to enter this discussion. And I still wouldn't move him. I want to make that clear. I'm just saying, I think this is a really good team. I still have high hopes for them, but my confidence level has been sufficiently shaken.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I just like, I was trying to think about like, well, what did I think coming into the season that's definitely wrong now? And it's like, did you
have Evan Mobley as your defensive player of the year pick? That didn't work out.
No, I probably had him high up there, but it's just like the injuries and the lack of playing time with all four of those guys together gives me like, I definitely take your point that it's a lot harder to buy this core four now than it was this time. Well, I mean, they were in the process of getting smoked in the first round this time a year ago. So maybe that's not the best way to frame it, but like, I think the injuries have to be a factor. Although, like,
but it's just like, even Darius Garland, when he was healthy this year, wasn't healthy. He was getting hit in the face every 5 seconds, but he was all over the place. And is he ever going to be a good finisher? And that's not going to get any easier while playing with these two bigs.
Yeah, I was just thinking, like, as you were talking, assuming they're going to lose Mitchell at some point, like, doesn't someone like KCP, just like if you had KCP and like Mitchell's spot, like that's what you're talking about, of like someone whose skills aren't like really redundant to Garland. And like, I don't know if you want to hitch your wagon to Garland now necessarily, but just the way that things shake out, don't tell me if you feel like this is wrong. I think the most likely guy of the four to leave is probably Mitchell, followed by Jared Allen, followed by Garland, followed by Mobley. So if you assume like this is really going to be Garland Mobley, like 2 or 3 years from now, and you'll have changed up the rest of it, like, I don't know, maybe you do start thinking about like, who's the two that we need? Because if it were Garland's on the move and Mitchell's there, you might still go for a true point guard. I don't know. It just feels like a real 2 and a real 3 with Garland and Mobley would get you pretty far.
Would you give up and this will be the team that apparently one of the teams will go longer on, would you give up, I'm just going to throw a couple scenarios at you. Would you give up Darius Garland? I'm not saying the other teams will do this, but would you do Darius Garland for Devin Vassell? There's other framework that might need to be involved, but is that something you're considering?
Man,
you do have to factor in, well, what is happening with Mitchell?
Right. That would be the reason I probably wouldn't, because then
if you don't have though. So if he signs an extension or says he's staying,
yeah, then I would be more open to that. The idea would be that Mitchell is now your point guard essentially, and Vassell is kind of like your, I don't know, secondary playmaker who's also
Devin Vassell becomes your, what if Chris Middleton and Devin Booker had a baby?
Yeah, sure. I always forget that's exactly how you describe Devin Vassell all the time. I guess I would. I mean, like Vassell got a little better, like under the radar this year. Garland had a terrible year, so you might be kind of trading from a position of like
terrible seems strong because Garland's numbers are fine, but just it wasn't impressed. And I know the injuries in there. The other one was, I don't know how I feel about this for the other team. I know their fan base loves them, but Jared Allen, and I'm assuming it might take let's just say Jared Allen for Herb Jones.
Oh, wow. I don't know if New Orleans would do that.
Because the money doesn't match. There has to be other stuff in there. But like, so if Cleveland said they could trade a first round pick, by the way, this summer. If Cleveland said, okay, Jared Allen and a first.
I mean, the Cavs, I think the Cavs should do that. Like,
okay. I think I wouldn't do it if I'm the Pelicans either, but with Trey Murphy there, you don't really know what's happening with Ingram.
Yeah.
So
Herb is like perfect. He's exactly what you're talking about for
would you do, if you're the Cavs though, some type of framework, Garland for Mikal Bridges? I
mean, yeah, maybe, but this
here, let me phrase
only if I know Mitchell's staying, which like
Mitchell's staying.
Yeah.
Are you doing Mobley? Would you rather trade and you're probably getting more like there's the context of the packages would look different, but based off this Cavs team and what they need, and maybe your questions about the dual bigs, would you rather trade Mobley or Darius Garland for Mikal Bridges? I guess I'm really just basically, do you have more faith in the two guards working out or with a wing, a different type of wing, or the two bigs working out with a different type? And look, they're in the playoffs. They're probably going to win a playoff series, and Max Strus was phenomenal for them this year. Isaac Okoro had a great year. I'm talking about the highest level because that's what this team is built to do. My confidence has been sufficiently shook.
I think that I haven't really thought of it the way you're framing it now, and we should move on after this. But I would rather go forward with Mobley and Allen than Garland and Mitchell, because the two small guards thing, like I just don't. I trust more in Mobley eventually developing in all the ways that we hope he does, as just a floor spacer or a guy that can do more offensively, so that the fit with a non-spacing big works. I just you can't make Mitchell and Garland turn into good defenders and grow. Like that's your ceiling is what it is with those two guys.
I just feel like I'd probably lean towards the two guards, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think Mitchell's been good enough defensively, and just like I want that outside in shot making ability on my team.
Yeah. All right. Hey, guess whose turn it is?
Finally,
you're off the hook. I have the Dallas Mavericks, and a couple of things. Because this is what I've been doing since the Kyrie Irving trade, is just catastrophizing. I thought that there was immense downside, like catastrophic disaster potential for the Mavs. If and when Kyrie had some distraction, off the court issue, suspension, ill-timed comments, like general misbehavior of one kind or another. I didn't even really. Everybody's like, oh, look at the fit, how well they've played together this year. It's like, that never really struck me as a huge stumbling block. I just Kyrie is so good and Luka is so good that I wasn't concerned. I don't think about them working on the court. It was more just Kyrie's going to do something that messes this up, and Luka is going to say, get me out of here ASAP. And congratulations, this is what you did to yourself by trading for Kyrie Irving. None of that happened. They were awesome on the floor. Kyrie was, by his standards, a Boy Scout this year. No, a couple issues, a fan thing in Utah, maybe that comes to mind. Otherwise, healthy, played the longest streak of games without interruption since I don't know, 2016 or something ridiculous like that. Up into the 30s, I think that streak got, where he broke his old record when he hit 21, I think, without missing a game. So that worked great. I was wrong about that. I think the other thing I was wrong about was I thought Grant Williams and even Seth Curry were going to be juice for this offense, just with high volume 3-point shooting, stand still, make shots. And that was going to matter. I did actually look back at what I was thinking, off-season grades, I think, or free agent signing stuff. And I thought both of those would work. And that there would be enough role-playing defenders on the wings, obviously not anticipating Dante Exum doing what he did. But that didn't work, and the Mavs recognized that immediately and pivoted, and all these trades have reformed the roster and put them on this huge run. Now in the playoffs, it's interesting to be having this discussion now after Dallas flopped so hard in game 1. Game 2 will be after we record this. But yeah, I was wrong about the Kyrie thing, and definitely was wrong about the moves that Dallas made initially kind of being helpful from a role-playing perspective. And then they kind of solved that at great cost by doing the Washington and Gafford deals. But kind of been off on the Mavs all year. Pick them to win the series against the Clippers, and they're down 1-0 and we're down 30 at halftime of game 1. So I clearly don't have a good feel for this team.
I got a Grant Williams. I got everything wrong that you did, except I was against the Grant Williams signing. And part of that was because of I didn't like giving up the pick swap, but was the framing of just we got our wing defender. And I was like, did the Mavs watch Grant Williams play at all? He was in Boston. So, but I missed on the trade deadline stuff. And the other thing, as so far I missed on, this is a small note, I was so in on Olivier Maxence Prosper having an impact as a rookie.
Yeah.
So that was just a small detail.
Well, I think, I would probably say I would not have expected Derek Lively to have such an impact, at least early in the year. Certainly didn't see Exum, probably didn't see Derek Jones Jr. doing what those
are by omission. I was actually in on Omax. I was like,
right.
This is
this is gonna make it different. Why are the Kings?
I think I was lampooning the Kings for not
probably. Shit, it's not the worst position to be in. All right, this will be a quick one here. Denver is next. There wasn't a lot to choose from. Thought they might miss Bruce Brown Jr. a little bit. Definitely, you were lower on the Reggie Jackson signing than I was. It wasn't it wasn't a disaster. It was fine. Like he shot, 36, just under 37% from three, averaged 10 a game. The non-Jokic minutes still sucked, but Reggie Jackson was never going to solve that on his own. So like really Denver was kind of who we thought they were all season. And I don't know, other than like some tiny marginal stuff, what, if anything, happened that was like a big surprise from the Nuggets this year. Do you have anything? Because it's kind of like they were just who they were all year.
I was probably lower on Peyton. Like I just didn't think the relying so much, and not that they necessarily had another choice. I think they could have used some of their assets to go get a veteran. But like I probably would have been more on board with that and advocated for it rather than doing. I don't want to necessarily call it a 2 timelines thing, but it's a little bit of what they're doing. But I missed on. I think Reggie Jackson. I don't know if he was good enough to warrant a player option, but just like that was one of my most egregious takes recently.
Well,
where it's just like, oh, Reggie Jackson's like one of the worst deals of the offseason, and so it's all right. It's the mini MLE. Like you need to chill here, man.
Yeah. No, Denver's really good. We knew it. We've got Golden State next.
No, we have Detroit, Grant. Wow.
Look, who had so this is 35 minutes into the pod, first alphabet mistake, because I was looking at my Western Conference only. Please proceed with Detroit.
So yeah, man, what did I not miss on with? No, did I expect them to suck this bad? Probably not. I think the thing I was most wrong about when it came to them was I feel, and he still will be really good. I really thought Jalen Duren was going to be a lot better as a sophomore. And it felt like he almost regressed as the year went on. And I went from appreciating the offensive experimentation they were doing with him, where it's, is that him bringing the ball up the floor? Is that him trying to create off the dribble, to like doing the exact inverse? Like, no, do not put the ball on the floor. Just stop. And I'm just wondering, have they done his development a disservice at all by one, not having enough spacing, not having a clear-cut hierarchy out there, and like just the noise that by the way, the thing I was probably most wrong about, I loved the Monty Williams hire in the moment. I'm always a fan of team spending on coaches. And then like the Killian Hayes stuff was just so fucking weird. And then this isn't necessarily I was wrong about, but like, it's something worth talk about. I never would have predicted that. Like, why, if Troy Weaver was on such thin ice, why was he tasked with like going through the deadline, hiring Monty Williams? And I know Tom Gore was a fan of Monty Williams and played a crucial role in getting him. So maybe that, but like now this is more of an organizational thing where it's, well, now you've decided your next lead executive, is going to be tied to this head coach that you just gave a boatload of money, who didn't want to come to you. You didn't give him so much money. He was like, yeah, fuck, I can't turn this down. So I'm happy I was right about Cade Cunningham, because people were out on him at the beginning of the year. That's my small victory lap for the Clippers. I was also wrong. I said I was going to trust Asar Thompson's jump shot over Ahmed Thompson's jump shot. I no longer feel that way. Just in case anyone's wondering. I was also wrong about that.
Yeah, I was just generally, like everything went wrong. So like I thought a few things would not go wrong with the Pistons. Like Cade Cunningham is the exception, because I think you're probably generally higher on him than me, and I might be lower than consensus. But he was good, and like that was a kind of progressive step you would want for a guy with, like, he's got more years of experience than actual games because of the injury. So it's like where he's at in terms of like where he should be developmentally, I think is, at least you're happier with where he is than you are about almost any other Pistons prospect. Like Ivy's another guy. I thought Ivy would have, closer to a leap this year, and it didn't really happen. I don't know how you hold the failure to develop against any of the players. Like Duren falls into this category too, just because the environment sucks. They played the wrong guys all year. Clearly there's like management that is just, Troy Weaver's like trying to save his job. And so maybe he's not pushing back on ownership enough when he's like, you have to give Monty Williams this deal to coach a team he already said no to. Like, that's all beyond the players. So like, I guess like maybe didn't foresee that the managerial structure and coaching staff would be as much of a hindrance to that development as I thought, as it turned out to be. But yeah, I mean, the Pistons kind of everything, snake bit for sure. Now it's time for the Golden State Warriors. Specific one here. I thought coming into this year that the starting five that won the title was going to be like very good / great again. And then you go, okay, well then Chris Paul solves the non-Curry minutes just as a backup, which kind of like that actually did sort of come to fruition a little bit. Like he was helpful on second units, and other than, he got hurt obviously, but like that part of it was okay. It was just like the starting unit, which was plus 22 in 700 possessions 2 years ago, was -7 in 293 this year. And there would have been more possessions, except Steve Kerr eventually just stopped playing that five together. I mean, Looney was out of the rotation for long
I
stretches.
never would have. That's a prediction
Right?
of omission, whereas I did not see the Kevon Looney
Yeah.
devolving into irrelevant.
He really took a huge step back. And then that was true of basically every other starter. Like Curry was a little worse. Not that that's not foreseeable, but you would have assumed that starting five that won a championship and like Looney really mattered and Wiggins really mattered and Thompson really mattered. Like you would assume they'd be like plus 10 or something. Like that's not like a huge ask. Like cut in half what their net rating swing was from 2 years ago. That didn't happen. So then all the tinkering had to happen. Some of which was positive because you saw some rookies play well, but that was the main thing is just like that unit was a given and then it wasn't like that was just that baseline you were starting from was not there.
Yeah, this team is so weird. If anyone didn't check it out, we did record an entire podcast and trying to figure out where they go from here. And the answer kind of is like the shrug emoji. There's just so many different things they can do. And I don't know if any of it's going to be enough. And so there's a lot. I did not have any faith really in Andrew Wiggins rebounding because I feel like both his rebounding and him just playing better in general, but because we have so much of these priors where it says Andrew Wiggins is not the second best player on a championship team. And when he was the second or third best player, it was more of an outlier. But I get like, I think what shocked me most or was most wrong about the team is I never would have thought they would have spent the whole year searching.
Yeah.
Like even with the injuries, the suspensions of Draymond Green, the time he missed, like this rotation never felt settled.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to know what is going on. Like, what do they have on Moses Moody that he's not allowed to play consistently?
I think that's really well framed. Like they just never found it all year. And like that Moody was very much affected by that. Cause it's like, well, okay. So now, Gary Payton's healthy again. So he's got to play. Well, Chris Paul's got to play. Well, Kuminga's taken over. Like he needs to start now and play. And it's just like, anytime there was a minutes crunch, Moody was on the short end of it. And it's because that first unit was in disarray, like immediately. And then you're plugging holes and who should start instead. And there's trickle downs to the rest of the rotation. And then like your second round, almost end of the draft rookie, like is starting for you, Trace Jackson Davis by the end of the year. Like that's just, some of that's positive again, but like total disarray because those veteran starters just weren't good. Like it just collectively, they just didn't do it. All right. So we've got the Rockets next. This one's like, I think because the Rockets probably exceed, I don't know. I think like the Van Vliet signing, I think we're both okay with that. I was okay with it because it's a short-term deal and like he played well. He was important to like.
We were not okay with it for the Raptors. That's
right. Yeah. To be clear, we've not been okay with a lot of the things the Raptors have done up to this year. So I guess like for me, at the beginning of last season, if you'd said, just say put the Bridges for Jalen Green framework on the table, I'd have been like, get Jalen Green out of here. Like this guy is never amounting to anything. He's undersized as a 2. He's like a garbage stats guy. Like I don't trust him defensively. I don't think he's serious. Like I would have been out, which is a dumb position to be in on anyone that's in their early 20s, no matter how they play. But I would have been all the way out on Jalen Green. I don't know if I'm all the way in now, but I'm more convinced that his run at the end of this year actually matters than I was because he's kind of done it before. But it was when the Rockets weren't like winning one and weren't playing mistakes at all. So my turnabout on Jalen Green is probably like, I don't know it's definitely the biggest like surprise to me and the biggest thing I got wrong going into the season. Cause I would have just been like, I'm not in the Jalen Green business. I want no part of an extension for him. Like I would have been just dead wrong on all that. Cause at the very least, he's pretty interesting now. Like you've got a lot more like, well, maybe he is a core piece thoughts.
The only thing odd is I was definitely wrong to not see him having a top 5 defense just when you were going to play, Alperen Sengun and even Jabari Smith Jr., who improved a bunch as well in the middle. And then you're looking at their backup bigs as Jeff Green and Jock Landon. It was just, this can't be a top 5 defense. And it was like, it was legit. Well, it wasn't just like, they got some opponent shooting noise in there. You're not top 5 by mistake. That doesn't.
No. And you would have, even if you had gone out and said, well, they're going to be a top 10 defense, you would have said, well, that's because Tari Eason's going to be first team all defense and play 75 games and just be incredible. And like, he barely played all year. So like they got there in ways that you would never have expected, even if you were somehow optimistic on their overall outlook defensively.
The Indiana Pacers for me, I'll take a quick eat some crow here because it's obviously not like settled just yet. I did not think that Jarris Walker was going to be this good on defense, like immediately. And the fact that he didn't play a huge role for most of the year, but like they gave him some of these like wing type reps by the end of the season. And I became a little bit more of a believer. I still don't love his offensive fit on this team, especially post Siakam trade, which leads me to what I was actually wrong about. I never thought the Pacers would have the gall to go out and make a move like that. I like the OG Anunoby sweepstakes, the Pascal Siakam sweepstakes. I just thought that they were going to be a team that didn't want to remain trapped in this rebuild, but they didn't want to give up that much equity for a player who accelerates their timeline, and especially a player who accelerates their timeline and is headed towards free agency. And so, yes, you have to assume they have this information on Pascal Siakam is going to come back. But I honestly think there's been a lot of weirdness there with them trying to figure stuff out on the fly. But even you kind of saw against Milwaukee in game one where they just got the doors blown off of them. Having that steady and presence of Siakam is going to benefit them in the long run, assuming he stays, which he will. So to give up, even though I feel like of the 3 first-round picks they gave up, there's like one semi-risky one right there. But it makes me more encouraged for the future where it's like they still have stuff. You include Jarris Walker, Benedict Mathurin, they could trade first-round picks. Like this, if they really believe that there's a wing out there that makes sense for them, they can go out. They could probably, if you're willing to put most of your stuff on the table, I don't know if they would have the best offer. They'd have a competitive offer for Mikal Bridges if he becomes available. So, and now I have confidence that, hey, maybe they would actually consider it. So I know that's not necessarily related to what's happening on the court, but that was not, even if we thought that Pascal Siakam was a great fit for Indy, which we did, I just did not think they were going to be the team that went out and got him. And I tipped my cap to them. And maybe Tyrese Halliburton kind of forced their hand a little bit by being not only injured, but just so transcendent for that first part of the season. It doesn't matter. Like to look at it and say, no, we're going to put this guy alongside another legitimate co-star and we're going to pony up to get him. I give kudos to that front office for doing that. And to get out of that without giving up either one of your blue chip prospects. I know we're probably lower on Benedict Mathurin compared to consensus, but Jarris Walker still kind of has this mystique about him. And like Benedict Mathurin is more appealing now, even post injury, than he was to me at the end of his rookie season.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know where I'm at on Mathurin. It's harder to judge. He doesn't seem as essential to the roster as he once did, which I guess I view as a good thing.
We were all about T.J. McConnell's ISO scoring too.
Yeah, well, you got banked, except in the playoffs, which we forget every year that like it doesn't work in the playoffs. Yeah, that's good for so I have the Clippers next. I mean, like where to start? Like I think at least the things I got wrong were like the obvious ones. I don't know if that makes it better or worse. Like didn't think Kawhi Leonard would stay healthy. I can't imagine why, and he really did until now when he's missing playoff games.
When it matters most, yeah.
I don't know how that shakes out. I had no faith that the Harden trade was going to work out. I know that's not like a preseason thing, but it was early enough in the year to where, it was the Clippers were still like not formed yet. And the jury's even out on that one. He was awesome in game one. It's not the first time he's been really good for a shorthanded team early in a playoff series, but he had great stretches. He was integral to this team having an awesome run that we keep referring to in the middle of the year. So that worked out. I mean, in conjunction with like Russell Westbrook going to the bench and becoming kind of a different type of player, I would not have foreseen that as likely. But yeah, it's mainly the health. It's like, I think I had them at 41 wins and it was just on the idea that like, well, Kawhi is going to play somewhere between 30 and 50 games and Paul George is going to be there too. And the Harden thing won't help. And, that's just how you get there. So, I think it's still very possible that this season ends with significant disappointment. But like in terms of the regular season, they just all of the most foreseeable, like go wrong things didn't go wrong as seriously as the risks suggested they could.
Yeah. I thought, I mean, we'll have to see how this plays out because I feel like some of their work, I never would have expected but I didn't predict their transition defense to be so bad. But the other thing was, I do think in the macro, like the James Harden fit proved more seamless than I ever thought it would have, especially after, remember they started, what was it, 0-5 with him in the lineup or whatever it was.
Yeah, it was just like, oh, here we go. Like, see, this is why he can't change. This is just, you got the guy at the wrong time. We have the other LA team, the Lakers here. I mean, I think one really obvious one is I thought D'Angelo Russell signed that contract and he would definitely be traded because the way it was structured, the way they got him to basically waive the implicit no trade was just like, he's just on the roster as a salary slot and they're going to exchange him for someone that makes more sense. And that didn't happen. And really, what's kind of wild is that it didn't happen and Gabe Vincent was hurt all year. You would think that like that would have inspired some desperation. Like we got to turn this into this D'Lo salary slot into someone that can help us on both ends to the extent that's possible with the barren trade market being what it was. But Russell was so good and so valuable offensively that they just like couldn't, I don't think. And maybe the no deal was out there, but I thought for sure, like if you asked me to bet on a player to be traded during the season, I might have just picked Russell first. And that it didn't even really seem to get close to that.
James Harden was calling his general manager a liar. Yeah, the thing I got most wrong about them, I probably would have called the Rui Hachimura one of the worst contracts in the league. The offense is just like legit with him apparently in LA. So I still don't necessarily maybe love the price point. And where is it getting you? But like the lineup with him, LeBron, D'Lo, Austin Reeves, and AD, like that group killed. And I think Rui Hachimura hit his threes this year, and there was some volume there, not a ton. And like the stuff he's able to do when he gets to his spots, and he'll hold up. Like he's at least not part of the Lakers' defensive regression over that second part of the season. So that was actually a pretty big, because everyone was like, "Oh, that's a fine." I'm like, we talking about the same player? Like he had that kind of like he just couldn't miss a shot in the playoffs, and we just decided, oh, he's good now.
And it was really like one series where he was like 6 of 9 from 3 or something. It's like, oh my God, this guy's like a 58% 3-point shooter.
And I was like, did they pre-negotiate this once Darvin Ham called him the Jokic stopper? And it was just like they agreed to these terms and couldn't go back on them once free agency actually began.
Pay that guy. I don't know what a Jokic stopper is worth, but it's a lot. All right, Memphis is next here. I mean, we didn't think the entire roster would get hurt and they'd play like 40 guys over the course of the season. I mean, that's the easy one. I think the main thing for me that I was really wrong about, well, it's like he didn't play enough to be like definitive, but the Marcus Smart thing did not look very good. I thought it made some sense.
You liked that?
Well, so no, I didn't think it was going to be great, but I was sold on the idea that like he's not perfect, but considering what Memphis needs, you have to replace Dylan Brooks's wing defense. You're going to need a point guard ish guy because you're going to have John Morant on the sidelines for the first 25 games. Like he can kind of fill all those niches potentially. And maybe he could have done a decent job had he and the rest of the roster stayed healthy, but he was immediately stretched way too thin. And like Boston may have just gotten off of his contract at a time when like they knew he didn't have a lot left. But I thought, while it was like very risky, I didn't love any of the broader asset management that the Grizzlies have exhibited over the last couple of years. Like we've talked about that before, how someone has a tweet out there of like, here's the assets Memphis had. Here's what it ended up
turning into. Fast break, like, breakfast. Yeah.
It's like, okay, like how were they at gunpoint? Like, is that what happened that they went from A to B and it's so much worse now? Yeah, I just thought Smart would be okay. He wasn't, but like in the grand scheme of Grizzlies problems, like that was maybe in the top 10 this year. So I don't know what to do with that.
I did not have any strong takes on GG Jackson, and now I'd probably take him in the lottery if we were doing a redraft. Yeah. Oh, but I will for anyone on YouTube. So Grant on the Grizzlies is basically saying whatever I just threw up on screen. So that leaves, am I up now? Is it my turn?
It's you got the heat.
Ooh, this is so this is not really exciting. I don't know why I was about to use that word. I didn't think that they would give up a first round pick for a non-star. And I hope Terry Rozier is going to end up being okay with his neck injury. But like, I just, now there, did you see the report too, where it's like, oh, the Miami Heat plan to go star hunting again this summer? And it's
how
I know it's only lottery protected, but then it turns into like isn't it immediately unprotected in 2028? I never thought they'd give up that type of a pick for like a non-star, or even just someone who is like, would you guarantee that Terry Rozier, if he's healthy and the Heat are humming, is a part of every single one of their closing units? I guess you're just saying like, would you have him close over Tyler Hero? Is that a given? And I just, because you have Jaime Jaquez, you have Bam Adebayo, you have Jimmy Butler's healthy. Like there's those three. Then I'd argue if you're going to keep Caleb Martin, he has to be in the discussion. There's also Duncan Robinson. You throw Terry Rozier, Tyler Hero into that equation. And I'm just very curious as to where they're going from here. And the reason I felt this way is just like, I know Jimmy Butler is opening a big face coffee shop in Miami, so he's unlikely to request a trade, but he turns 35 in September. He's going to be extension eligible. Are you going to give him that extension? If you don't, what is that going to mean for him? It's just, I know you just made the finals. There's been alien shit going on since 2020 when you get to the postseason with this team. We'll see if they have any of that magic left. Spoiler alert, they don't. But I just like, it's very uninspiring. And everyone's just kind of operated on this assumption that the Heat will figure it out because they're the Heat. And maybe they will, but I just don't. If they ever want players that you actually have to get, and forget about the Dame stuff. Like that was, I really feel like their offer was real, but it was a matter of preference. And
Right.
I get why you would prefer what you ultimately got from the Bucks. My whole thing is just if they actually get into trade talks where they need to outbid or beat out another team, they can't. Like I mean, Jaime Jaquez is kind of that trounce card at this point, maybe. But if you're trading Jaime Jaquez, like how much better is your team? Who's coming in that's making your team that much better?
Yeah. I think for me, I viewed the decisions they made on Gabe Vincent and Max Strus as like part of the Lillard like thought process. Like we're going to get him. So it's not as we don't need to overpay or whatever, or try to keep either of these two guys. I don't know if that's actually like the right way to look at it, but I thought, well, you let two guys go that really mattered in your playoff rotation, one of which offensively, you had a bad offense anyway last year, and you're losing a guy that really was key to like the times when your offense was functional, and you didn't replace them with like, you not only did you not get Lillard, you let two guys go that you did so in anticipation of getting Lillard. So it's like, well, now an offense that was iffy before is going to be even worse. And it's like, I was really low on the Heat, even while acknowledging all the normal Heat stuff that you have to. Their offense was better this year. So it's like, I guess that's Jaquez. I guess that's Bam, like doing a little more. I guess that's Hero for when he was healthy, which was not that often. So I was wrong that like letting those two guys go and not getting Dame was just going to be fatal. It's still like not great because you still don't have Dame and you can't score, but like it didn't like sink them by any stretch. Cause actually they won two more games like than they did last year. So they didn't fall apart like I thought was possible. Let's see.
On to the Bucks. So there's receipts on this. I think on the podcast and in written. I said they were going to have, it might have been, I'll say top 5, but I might have said top 7. I said they were going to be at least top 7 on both sides of the floor. They were 6th in points scored per possession. They ended up 19th in points allowed per possession, which is an improvement over where they started the season. I really just bet on the fact that Giannis and Brook, those core lineups were going to be so good that it wouldn't matter. Mm-hmm. They were not, in part because the Dame Giannis line dynamic, you've seen it when it's at its best and it can be deadly, but it never just clicked. And I don't know if that's just the feeling out process. This will be better next year, assuming that this roster is still intact. But when you're looking at the defense specifically, I thought Andre Jackson Jr., Marjon Beauchamp, Jay Crowder, all those guys, two of those guys, the first guys, I thought they would play a role and be good. I thought Pat Connaughton would be better. I thought Jay Crowder would have been better than he was. I didn't think Chris Middleton, we always knew the injury risk there. I didn't think he would look this much of a liability so often on the defensive end. I was just wrong about that. And look, the other thing that I definitely missed on, and this isn't necessarily I said he wouldn't be the problem, but if you would have told me that Giannis was kind of part of the transition issues early on, I would have been like, fuck you. There's no way. And so I really missed on how much I guess they were going to miss Jrue Holiday's defense. I thought they were going to have at least enough to offset it like a semi amount. And it's just to hover around the bottom 10 in points allowed per possession. You need to be caps lock elite on the offensive end, which they can be. But when your two best players are just, I don't know what the word is. It feels like there's a fluctuation there with how they work together.
Yeah, I thought that the Lillard, essentially swapping Holiday for Lillard would address like, well, the Bucks can't score in late games and like this will fix that, but you're giving back some defensive integrity and some intangibles. And like Lillard's not the reason for all the defensive issues. Like it's very much like it's a collective effort, especially with transition stuff. It's not like a point guard is not integral to your transition defense unless he's just like never running back. And even then, so that wasn't really right. The other thing that I think I just didn't foresee happening is like, you're going to fight. I get it. You had to move on from Budenholzer because like it was losing to the 8th seed the way they did, even with Giannis missing some of those games, like the whole, like it's run its course thing. It felt like I get it, but like to get that first hire so wrong, was a surprise to me. And then frankly, to get like the second hire feels to me wrong because
At least
like,
flimsy, yeah.
so it's just like, it's, I don't know what the alternate course of action should have been because like, again, I get it. Like it just, sometimes time just runs out on a coach for a team. And it felt like the circumstances were such that like, that's where they were with Budenholzer. But like, you gotta, it's the easy decision is moving on. The hard part is like getting the right person to lead them. And the stakes are pretty high because this team is older and Giannis is always someone that like everyone's got in the back of their mind as a flight risk. And they just got like 2 coaching hires wrong, it feels like. So I did not see that coming.
It'll be an interesting challenge trade. Damian Lillard for Jimmy Butler.
Let's see. What would I would rather, I'd rather have Jimmy Butler, I think.
I think in a vacuum, yeah, but Damian Lillard feels like what he does best is going to age better than what Jimmy Butler does best, which is play like a psychopath.
Right, right. And well, right now that's bearing out. That takes us to the Minnesota Timberwolves. We were both high on this team, which
let's just move on. We have no notes for ourselves on this.
The main one for me, or the first one that came to mind anyway, was like, so Jaden McDaniels gets a new deal. We both love him. Breakout imminent. Like he's going to continue making threes. He's going to be first team all defense. He didn't have like a objectively disappointing year, but he wasn't as good on offense as I thought he would be. And he wasn't as good on defense as I thought he'd be. Now, if he's great in the playoffs, then who cares? But
he's been great in the playoffs thus far. So who cares?
Right. So who cares? And that just may be, I'm just like searching because like what other than like, I guess you're not going to get me to say Nickeil Alexander-Walker wasn't someone I was high on. And he I
didn't think he was going to be, he's probably going to get some all defense votes and he deserves them. Now I'm going to take it. This is normally, I feel like you're better at being more definitive and maybe sometimes inflammatory than I am. You're not like the Jaden McDaniels season is borderline disastrous for them with that deal because it's just like what he looked like on offense this year where I think I heard someone called it like 3-point shooting streaky this year. No, it sucked for most of the year. It sucked. And the volume was hardly ever there. It sucked. Jaden McDaniels is a very good basketball player, but you signed him to a deal that we thought was a bargain. But if you just don't have that reliability on the offensive end, this is where I'm at. The defense is still top tier. And it's the fact that it holds up in the playoffs and you can just say, you know what, go erase Devin Booker from existence. That's phenomenal. And he's young. I have hope for him. I don't know if he's ever going to figure it out offensively on this team. He probably needs more space, more agency. You cannot convince me though, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker is part of this, that if the Wolves get into this financial crunch, be it this summer, which is, by the way, if they say it's this summer, that's made up. Don't listen to that. It's made up. It's because they're cheap.
Yeah.
But if it's at the deadline, if it's at the end of next year, you can't convince me right now that Jaden McDaniels is more important or more workable for this team's future than Karl Anthony Towns. And I didn't think that I would be saying that come this close. So I think that's my second just like top rope take of the podcast compared to you. You were even more tepid on the Cavs than I was.
But don't you think that even on the okay, moving on, don't you think that even on this deal, McDaniels is the type of player and he's at the age where it's like, you're not talking $50 million a year in that range like you are with Towns and like of dubious like big stage winning capabilities, even though he was like part of the reason that they did so well in game 1 against the Suns. Like I feel like McDaniels is still, well, we don't need him to do a ton offensively. If he can just hit a reasonable rate of threes and defend like this, then like, I don't know, that's worth close to what he's making. He's movable, I guess and maybe I'm not disagreeing with you. Like he's movable on that deal in ways that Towns is maybe not.
So I guess the best way to frame it is if you think he's more important to their future, it's because he makes half as much.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't think you can look at him and I want to make it clear that matters, but I don't think you can look at some of their biggest offensive struggles and even how hard stuff can be on Ant sometimes and see what you saw from Jaden McDaniels this season and say, you know what, he's going to have the dynamism to develop. And look, maybe I'm going to be wrong again. McDaniels was because I was wrong. I went on here after he signed the extension. I was like, people are going to have sticker shock. This is going to end up being one of the best deals in the league. And it doesn't look like a bad deal, but just like kind of the parallel of, so the Pelicans got Herb Jones for what? And Jaden McDaniels cost what?
And Herb Jones is just objectively better at everything. right? Like I don't know what McDaniels is better than Herb Jones at. There's no clear scale.
Yeah, I mean, I'm strong. It's definitely offensively,
Right.
Herb Jones is just better now. And I
Yeah.
remember there were people, and I normally agree with Shamit Dua on a lot of things, and he's even come out. I'm not trolling him, saying he was wrong, that he thought they should have preserved their flexibility and not signed Herb Jones. They should have kicked the can. And I think the Dunked On guys felt that way. There were a lot of people that felt like, yeah, why would you do this now? And I was like, well, that turned into one of the best deals in the league. So that's how you do it now.
Which was that Herb is one of the best.
Because that was his max, for them,
right.
Unless there was going to be some poison pill stuff involved, which you don't decline the team, yada, yada, yada. So,
yeah. All right. That takes us to New Orleans. I mean, the main thing for them was just, it's kind of like, it's the obvious stuff, kind of like the Clippers, where agreed that the ceiling was high. Like there was a ton of potential, a ton of depth. I didn't think Zion would stay healthy. I didn't think Ingram would stay healthy. And I didn't think McCollum was like enough of a needle mover at that position. Certainly the first two issues, the health of the main guys on this team, I was wrong about. Although, like, what's weird is, there's all the lineup data that says, like, it's really this team's depth that is its strength. And, Zion Ingram lineups aren't as good as Zion alone or Ingram alone or whatever. Like, it wasn't necessarily that, they stayed healthy and they dominated. It might have been they stayed healthy and played against first units. So a bunch of really overqualified backups could just kick ass against the other team's backups that weren't nearly that good. So I guess there's kind of a workaround, but I think generally I was lower on New Orleans than a lot of people. And the main thing was, like, I just did not trust the main guys to stay healthy and contribute. And they did. And I was wrong about that. And they had a better season than I expected.
Well, you were wrong, but Zion's out now. So
right.
that's what I was. I don't know if this wouldn't be something I was wrong about because I wanted to see it. But the fact that now I think we're just not going to see it is sort of just like there needs to be a different path. I would have been all in on Zion at point guard. And like, if you're keeping the roster relatively the same or you're not going to make this big time move, that is the path you travel. But it's not that he's not good enough. It's just that something's apparently always going to go off the rails with his body at some point. And so you now need to recalibrate where it's, I think a lot of people were looking at if they were going to upgrade, it was, well, they have to trade Jonas Valanciunas' expiring contract or you move CJ McCollum. And I'm at the point where it's, well, Jonas is a free agent. We'll see what happens with that. But it's like Ingram just makes as the odd man, or it's Ingram or Zion almost. And I'm picking Zion in that because I think he's probably easier to fit in based off what he in theory could do if he has the ball slightly less with more of a floor general than Brandon Ingram is.
Do you think it's unfair to say that Ingram's signature skill, which is valuable, certainly in the playoffs, is the ability to make like bad shots or like really difficult shots? That's been overwhelmingly clear to me through the play-in and the first game of the first round.
His signature skill for sure. And there's other stuff he does well. I think I don't want to call it a refusal, but like the inability to stick with his 3-point volume or his off-ball volume where and look, Zion, I'm wondering how much of it is just, okay, well, you get into a groove playing like this with Zion, but then Zion's gone. And so now you're asked to do different things. And so you fall into these different habits. But like, dude, we're in year, what is this? Like 3 or 4 of just like, you need to jack up more threes. Like that is the baseline. Just forget about the functionality of it all, how they're coming, how much jack up more threes. And it's just that number is not nudged nearly enough.
That's why he's the guy I agree with you. He's the guy to move now because I
think he's really good, by the way.
I think so too. But I think there's a real, the ability to make difficult shots is not something you build your team around unless he also is shooting high volume open threes and is like facilitating really regularly. Cause then it's just like, I don't know, DeMar DeRozan is a flawed player, but it's like, he is probably better at that than Ingram is. And he's the best player.
Better passer, which helps.
Yeah. So do all that stuff. I was blown away by how good Ingram is, especially in these high stakes games with like really intense defense, at just making ridiculously contested, difficult individual shots. And then it's like, at the same time, I'm thinking like, this is not a sustainable model. Like can't.
I was smitten. It was before he got injured towards the end of the regular season. He was playing really well off of Zion. They weren't necessarily directly involved with every action together, but he was off the ball, taking threes. It just made more sense. But that invariably goes away. And so very quickly, Brandon Ingram, Dyson Daniels, maybe a pick for Trae Young.
Oh, I think I'm going to shit on all your Trae Young trades because I just don't want Trae Young on the receiving team, like just in general. Just so be ready for a full offseason of being like, I don't think I want Trae Young. That's a great trade for the Hawks. The Hawks should do that. How about that? I like that side of it.
Take us to the Oklahoma City Thunder, please.
No, I will not, because you have to do the New York Knicks. Now we are
Holy
one.
fuck,
We are
there's
1
my
to 1
first
in
matchup.
alphabet
Here
screw
we
up.
are. All right.
Tied it
the
up.
New York, I think this is another team, kind of like we said this about, what was the team we said this about? Oh, the Bulls, where it's our sins of omission rather than anything we had to. So the Knicks, we hit their over. We thought they're going to be really good. You can't, denigrate us for not saying that Jalen Brunson is going to be a top 5 MVP candidate.
Yeah.
The thing that I got wrong, because I remember saying the Dante DiVincenzo signing was good. It's not going to do nearly enough to help solve or increase the Knicks' spacing.
Mm-hmm.
Lo and behold,
turns out
Dante DiVincenzo just turned into one of the most efficient, high-volume three-point shooters of all time. So, Grant, I'm going to give you a stat for this. This is one I know because I wrote about it, and I've known about it for a while just because this is what he was tracking towards. Here's the list of every player who has had a season where they logged 2,000 plus minutes, attempted 15 plus three-pointers per 100 possessions, and nailed them at a clip of at least 40%. Dante DiVincenzo, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, end of list.
It's pretty good. Pretty good list to be on regarding anything to do with 3-point makes.
I don't know that I have anything to add. There's stuff that's surprising me with this team where I don't think I didn't think they were going to navigate. If you told me they had all these injuries, including the OG, they would have been the 2 seed in the East. We all kind of knew how good Isaiah Hartenstein was, but like him playing at an all defense level, that takes you like Deuce McBride just coming in. And again, those are all just kind of the mistakes of omission, like not foreseeing those. So this team with Dante DiVincenzo just has unlocked he had the fact that a Tibbs team was 3rd in 3-point attempt rate after the All-Star break. That's fucking wild. In 2024.
No, that has to be DiVincenzo if you got a 0 on a player specifically. I think, I don't remember this. I don't check the receipts, but I bet I was suspicious of like what worked so well for the Knicks last year, which is like, oh, they get every offensive rebound and kick it out and make threes. Like, that's not going to happen again. And it's like pretty much like why they're still good. So, I mean, Brunson leveling up to like an all NBA. Like,
and you can't, anyone who has receipts, you can't get me on not liking the Josh Hart trade anymore because I took my comeuppance last offseason for that. I said it ended up being a great trade. The extension was fine. So we're on the other side of that one. We're not spending a lot of time on the Knicks just because I think that one was on. That's a monster season of just like volume and efficiency.
Really great. Now we will move to the Oklahoma City Thunder. Dan, I bought Sam Presti's we got to finish our breakfast preseason head fake, like hook, line, and sinker. I thought maybe
a thumbnail. Oh, I already used that thumbnail. I used it. I remember I made the Sam Presti's a liar thumbnail for a Thunder video.
Yeah, he tricked us. He tricked us again. I thought a small step forward was possible, or even like a little regression. Just you had him at 41 wins. I had him at 44. They were better.
They end up with Grant?
What's that? More than that. We'll just go with more than that. Considerably more than that. And so like just all of the Thunder young players getting better, even ones like SGA, who was like fringy MVP last year. I mean, this is the most positive miss I think we have, right? It's like we just didn't see the leap, and the leap happened, right? That's the simplest way to put it. I don't know if you want to zero in on anybody else in particular, but
here's what I was wrong about.
What you got?
Do you remember? I think the word I used was phrasing was uncharacteristically uninspiring when they made the Case and Wallace trade, who ended up being first team all rookie for me, is defending his ass off in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Cracked the rotation of a title contender as a rookie regularly. His minutes fluctuated a little bit. And I was just like, they couldn't have got like all that, just like move up. Like they did that. The Davis Bertans deal is like, it feels like they should have been able to get more out of that. It doesn't fucking matter. Like Case and Wallace is going to be a stud. And you know what? I probably would have, I wasn't considering this scenario, but if you would have said, well, who's more important in their future, Case and Wallace or Josh Giddey, I might have picked Giddey just solely because I thought he would have more trade value. Yeah. And it's just like, the Giddey stuff, you said every young player got better. He had his moments this season.
Forgot about him.
That dude's got to, for this roster to be optimized, he's got to go. I'm not saying he's the worst player of all time. I don't see it. First of all, and you're standing in the way of Case and Wallace to some extent.
Well, and even if it's not Wallace, like just that spot in the lineup is like just begging for somebody.
Are you ready for another trade to Love?
Always.
Josh Giddey plus X amount of picks for Denny Avdia.
Oh, do it. Yeah, absolutely. What are the
Would
what
you
are
do
the
after you're the Wizards?
if I'm getting like I'm gonna need
How
at
many
least
first would you need to attach to the extension eligible Josh Giddey to get Denny Avdia, who, by the way, might be on? Well, he's definitely on one of the best contracts in the league now.
I think you got to give me two, and one of them needs to be like legit minimum. Because I
None of
think
this
obvious.
fan Presti voodoo, like top 24 protected for
No,
any
none
year.
of that. I want a real one. Don't give me any of these phony picks. All right. Yeah, the Thunder are great. We were wrong about them not being super great immediately. I think you are still up. You got two in a row coming here.
Yes, we are on to the what comes after the letter O, the other
Another-
letter O,
another
Orlando
letter O.
Magic. Did you see I was buying myself time? I was like, who am I forgetting right
Yeah, it's
now? We
very
should have the
true.
list in front of us, but it's not that fun to do it that way. So the Magic, they were probably okay. No, I didn't expect them to be contending for home court advantage spot in the playoffs. That's missed on that. Again, that's more like the Thunder were super ahead of schedule. So were the Magic. We knew their defense was going to be awesome, especially after what we saw following their, 5-20 start last year. As someone who was higher on him than you, and I think consensus,
Most people were. Go ahead.
Jalen Suggs.
Yeah.
Just we knew what he could do defensively. I will say the offensive improvement has not answered their playmaking question. He's gotten better as a playmaker. He's gotten way better as a shooter, as a decision maker going downhill. And then to do all of that while going on defense, if you would have, even as someone who was holding out hope for him, if you would have told me that he's someone they have to extend this summer, because if they let it get to restricted free agency, that might cost them max money from just a team building perspective. Or if you told me like Jalen Suggs might get the Jaden McDaniels extension this year, the equivalent of it, I'd be like, no, he might. He's that good. He's that important to what they're doing. So what I mean, there's other stuff, but I think this would be more mistakes of omission. Just, Jonathan Isaac would have been did not qualify, but like played enough to where you're like, he's the best per minute defender in the league or something along those. I never would have gone with that. Something that'd be a little bit more negative, like the Franz Wagner shooting this year experience. But again, that's not something I didn't have a strong take against Jalen Suggs, but I did not think we were going he made my first team all defense. I called him one of the 5 best defenders in the NBA. So like, that's just not, I was not high enough on Jalen Suggs was my sin.
I gotta stop.
Cardinal sin, Adam Silver might say.
Did you gamble on him? I gotta stop like giving, because I don't know if you have suffered from this, but like I there's so much to know about the NBA. There's so many like competing thoughts you have to keep in your head. There's like just about players and like who do I need to pay attention to most? Like who's got this potential? Who's got that? I
Remember
find
how easy our jobs were when it was just understanding cap sheets.
Yeah,
that's what the NBA was at one point.
Well, so like, tell me if you do this. I'm like in a rush to be like, this guy either has like, I think we did this probably with Evan Mobley on the positive side. Like this guy is going to be whatever. Like he's going to be great. He's going to be one of the best defenders in the league. He's going to be historically good. Like I want to just get that down. So like, that's my take on Evan Mobley. And I will assess everything he does like through that lens. And I go the other way. I went that way on Jalen Green of like, I'm out. I'm not interested. I don't think he's got it. I went that way on Jalen Suggs. It was like, if you can't shoot and you can't pass and you're a guard, there's just no future for you. I don't care how good you are on defense. So I was like, I'm out on Jalen Suggs, which is like, I just have to stop doing this because guys can get better. Like he still isn't a good ball handler, isn't a good passer, can shoot it now and is even better defensively than like at some point, if you can't do anything, but you're a top 5 at something in the NBA, like then it doesn't matter if you're not that great at other stuff, you have a future. I got to stop writing guys off or like putting them in a box. So I sort of have to stop. Don't have to think about them as hard anymore. Cause there's like just not enough mental bandwidth for everybody. I got to stop.
I wonder how much you get. Everybody in general gets impacted by like, well, they could have had like Scotty Barnes or something. Yeah. Or was he was picked before Scotty.
Well,
Barnes.
I remember thinking Toronto should have taken Suggs.
So, that's so flip that. You know what you actually need though, because it happened to me. And maybe you've had it. You're not online enough. And I'm not talking about you need to be more in tune with like masturbatory NBA Twitter. That's like this team won 31 games and they were fucking awesome because we can't criticize people or teams. It's just not allowed anymore. There have been entire Reddit threads done when younger in my career where I was less inclined to push back against things that were pitched to me at our, parent company. And now I will push back, but like I wrote some stuff that I probably didn't fully believe. And like there were Reddit threads made, and this is like years ago now, and you went back and you looked, and I was like, that kind of opened my eyes to being, you can let the hook be what the editors want it to be if you agree on a pitch, but like your text needs to reflect your actual view. You don't need to be as hedging is okay, or acknowledging that this is like not fully resolved just yet is okay, but you're not going to have that moment because you are a healthy human being who's not nearly online, or your friends aren't sending you the Reddit stuff that's written about you. So
I shudder to think how I would feel if I ever sought any of that out, which I
look, you want a little ego boost here? Kenny Beecham, who's, I don't know if you know who he is just like, he's a basketball content genius, has a huge following, gave you kudos for your article where you gave out teams for every single award. I also guarantee you that the views he got going through your article did better than your actual article did.
Like by a factor like 1,000, probably. Of course he did.
So, but yeah, so like you do good work, but it's like maybe you need that. You're just not online. You're too healthy, Grant. You need to hate yourself more.
That's why I'm not online. All right, you still
the Philadelphia 76ers. Yeah. So look, I don't really know what I was wrong about with this team other than I didn't see them being so good without James Harden. This is pre-Embiid injury. I smashed their under on the win totals. And I guess if you're going to look at it, I'm going to say, and this feels weird to say because of how poorly they played without Joel Embiid, they won the minutes Tyrese Maxey played without Joel Embiid this year. And so I guess what I was wrong about is I didn't see Tyrese Maxey's leap as an all-NBA player coming, all-NBA type player coming. And I think the biggest level of improvement he did, I do think this flew under the radar a little bit. I think he's been a little bit better defensively this year. And I think he's always been, I don't know if it's underrated or underappreciated or just misportrayed, where it's like that dude fights on defense for the most part. But like you look at you still don't necessarily trust him if you need to be in this slowed down situation of, okay, we'll run the offense from this dead stop. But like there's a downshifting to the way that he gets about going downhill when he gets to the floater, gets defenders on his hip, and his decision-making has evolved from there. And that's big time to like be a team where if Joel Embiid never gets hurt, which I know is a massive caveat, but to be a team that prioritized cap flexibility in the James Harden trade, essentially. And then would there have been, if Joel Embiid stays healthy, any real drop off from Philly's title stock relative to last season? I guess in theory, because you went from having Maxey and Harden and Embiid to just having Embiid and Maxey in this version of Tobias Harris. So like, I guess I just didn't realize how close or how much even having Harden and Embiid was eclipsing what Tyrese Maxey could do. I just looked at him like, well, it's really great. Like, look what he was able to do without the Ben Simmons during that stretch. But it's like now he's able to fit alongside James Harden, rip him away from the James Harden partnership, and it's just he might be one of the 20 best players in the NBA now.
I think I just thought that, I mean, some of this is preseason because I guess the noise was already happening then, but some of it was in season. I just thought like there's no scenario where they get out of this James Harden situation like looking better just because he's got no trade value. It's a huge distraction. So you're going to bring him back and he's going to play. And then like now the best case scenario is he plays for you. And then you have to deal with like, what am I paying him next time on his next deal this summer when he's due again? So the fact that the Sixers like didn't miss him, are in better position now because of what they got from the Clippers than they were with Harden. Part of that's Maxey doing what you said. I just thought like, oh my God. So again, it's almost like the Dallas catastrophizing thing of like, well, now Embiid's going to ask out because this thing is shit. And they like got no outs and they got all this cap space. Who knows what they're going to do with it. And they got assets for Harden. I just didn't think there was a way out of that. That was like a positive landing spot. Phoenix
Suns.
One, thought Keita Bates-Diop was going to be the fifth closer. Not on the team anymore. Two, thought Yusuf Nurkic would be incredibly unhelpful, specifically with this team, because he's such a bad finisher. And I thought that the way the roster was constructed with all these offensive guys together, he was going to be put in a position where he was just going to be dared to like finish inside against contests. And that hasn't really happened. And I underrated his ability to pass the ball as a roller. Like I knew that was a thing. I didn't think that would matter if teams just said like, nope, you got to make layups because he can't make layups. They've worked around that just fine. I don't know. Like I hope you have like more of a macro take on the Suns, because mine were pretty narrow and they kind of finished around like where I thought they would be. I wasn't super high on the three offensive stars together working out as some were. But like, I just have like smaller things. I don't know that the Suns are in a vastly different position now than I would have guessed.
So I remember saying that 29 other NBA teams should be sued for allowing the Suns to get Yuta Watanabe on the minimum. And I think the macro take is I know that you got K-H Diop wrong, but you induced more or viewed it with more skepticism their minimum signings. I was all over it.
I was still high on him, to be
No,
fair.
but I was like, I don't know why people are so worried. Like they have Eric Gordon, they have Josh Okogie, they have K-H Diop, they have Yuta Watanabe, they have all these different. They killed it, and they still did fine. But when your margin for error is just fine, like so slim, you can't be just fine. You need to hit on more of these than you did. I thought Nas Little was actually going to be a good, productive addition for that. Missed on that. I did not see, but again, this becomes a mistake. Like Grayson Allen turning into the league's best 3-point shooter. And then also like part of this was he didn't have a choice, but like he handled a lot defensively for them. I will in retrospect wonder, because if you have a problem with where the Suns are now, I still think your initial problem is with the Kevin Durant trade, not the Bradley Beal trade. But it is kind of interesting of like, should they have actually gone down that route still? And I think you ultimately have to, just because of the assets you gave up to get him are just, you never would have gotten that caliber of player with them. Part of the problem with that is he has a no trade clause. That's why he was available for that price. And this is now you're heading into next season, which did I say this to you already? And I definitely didn't realize it until it was something I saw. You have 3 of the 7 highest paid players in the NBA on your payroll. That is, you want to talk about, well, how many stars can you fit on your roster in this new CBA? It can't be 3 of the 7 highest paid players.
No.
It can't be these guys who are on their like third maxes, basically, which is what the Suns are kind of looking at, or third deals, fourth deals, whatever it ends up being. It's, you need the 25 or 30% max sprinkled in there at some point, which they don't have. But yeah, I think it's just, I was way too high on the work they did. They still did when you look at it. It's also, are we impacted by the fact that, well, these dudes are playing, but would they actually be playing on all these other teams? And it's like, some of them are playing. Drew Eubanks is playing out of necessity. And maybe some would argue he's not. But like, so would he be playing on all these other teams?
On the court. He's been on the court.
So I was way too high on their minimum signings.
Yeah, that's fair. I think it's easy to look at them and say, like, those guys seem across the board like better than your typical minimum signings, but that's not the same thing as saying like, therefore they're totally adequate as like 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th guys. It's like maybe they're 10th, 11th, 12th guys, and that is that turned out to be more the case. I do think it's interesting that like whatever you thought about the Suns, you got a piece of like the best outlook and the worst this year. Like you saw some moments where like, oh my God, these guys cannot be stopped. And then you saw, and we will, I think, continue to see in the playoffs, like the depth isn't here, the talent's redundant. You're super fucked long term. Like there's just nowhere to go from this, right? Like you're saying 3 of the 7 highest paid guys. Like what? So who are you trading? Like, and when? Because this isn't good enough, and they're all getting older.
Aren't we about? Isn't it Kevin Durant trade request o'clock?
We're due, right? It's been, how many months has it been? Like 10, 11, whatever it is.
You're about to go on a little bit of a mini streak here.
I am. We'll start with this. I mean, we addressed this with Charlotte. Portland is next. Scoot Henderson was wrong about Scoot being the best point guard prospect since like whatever Russell Westbrook, Derrick Rose, all those names and others were thrown out there. I drank the Kool-Aid. I saw him in whenever that was, the G League Ignite game against.
You didn't just drink it; you made it.
I just mainlined the powder. I didn't even mix it with liquid. I just dry scooped it.
You dry scooped it.
I dry scooped the Kool-Aid. Can you imagine? Look, I'm with you. I'm not giving up on the idea that Henderson can be like a really good player, a franchise cornerstone, whatever you want to say. He was terrible this year, just the least efficient high volume shooter in the NBA. He ticked up a little bit towards the end of the year when nobody was paying attention, which is what Portland players do. They have these runs at the end of dead seasons where it's like, oh, what about next year? So
you bite your tongue. Ryan Rupert is the real deal.
Right. Yeah.
You think I'm joking?
I still like Shaden Sharp, and he did this last year, and Anthony Simons broke out 2 years ago, and I like him too. But yeah, the Scoot thing is just number one. I guess like it's all of a piece with the way the Lillard thing went down, but like I don't know what I necessarily got wrong about the Lillard thing. I think I mean, the trade assets they got back in those exchanges ultimately look worse now because Robert Williams didn't stay healthy and Brogdon didn't stay healthy, and like Ayton's been terrible. So like that's all part of it. But like those were like easy to spot risks at the time. But just Scoot not being what I thought.
In DeAndre Jordan's defense, he got better once he stopped sleeping on a bed made of Moncala beans and gravel.
Sure, that helps.
So,
nobody could get him on hipped to like you need a decent bed before that.
That was not the Blizzard stuff. I understand why people think that's tired. Like that's a real one. The bed thing is one of the stupidest things I've ever should not have been an issue.
It defies belief. It's got to be Scoot for you, right? Like, I mean, we could go other directions.
I'm definitely more encouraged by his close to the season for sure. I did think I saw like more stuff from Matisse Thybulle on offense than I thought I was ever really going to see, but I don't know if that's like the product of the environs or if this is like actually real because his 3-point shot was up and then he kind of did the inverse where it like fell off later in the season for a Portland player. But yeah, I'm with you.
All right. Tumani Kamara was good, but if you paid any attention to Suns Twitter before he was traded, everybody
the timeline already. Pod guys came on here during our look ahead and they were gutted that he was included in the Brett. That was the Ayton trade, excuse me. Yeah.
All right, we got the Kings next. I don't know like what went. I'm trying to think. This was a hard one for me because they were kind of similar. Their offense was a little worse. Their defense was a little better. I guess like and Keegan Murray took a step like everybody kind of hoped he would.
He took a leap.
Yeah,
I would think just because of what he does defensively.
A step and a leap. What's between? Like he took he bounded. Like I don't know.
Okay, Klein.
I think
I definitely got this wrong. This clearly wasn't the year, nor was last season the off season for them to go make the all in like type of play where we said, how could you not go into this season more aggressively addressing some of your perimeter defensive concerns?
Yeah.
Is the answer because they kind of understood like, well, maybe our offense is on a little bit of shit. Not that they could have seen the Kevin Huerter regression coming, but like, the Keegan Murray defensive bound, so we're calling it the bound, the jump, the spike, the uptick, that's huge for them. And now the emergence of Keon Ellis, I think that kind of changes where it's like, oh, maybe it doesn't need to make it all in, but like, can we get a Caruso? Can we get Mikal Bridges would be great for this team. Doesn't Jeremy Grant make sense? But they clearly just like they weren't there. And now that you have more information on Keegan Murray, maybe it'll help you get there. But like, they're an interesting team because progress isn't linear, but I would argue that while they have more information on what they are, they didn't actually make a ton of progress.
Yeah. I think I said this about the Pelicans the other day when we recorded of like, a little bit more about the team now, but you're kind of ultimately in the same spot you were with some of the same questions like 3 years ago. And the way I feel about the Kings right now today is a lot like how I felt about them at the end of last year. And so it's just like, I don't know. Murray getting better is huge, but like Sabonis having another underwhelming like performance as a top guy with all the double doubles and all the numbers, just like, and you don't make the playoffs. Fox does this every year where like he's better at a few things, but worse at others. And it's just like, he never makes like the full, maybe he's already made the full leap, but like, it just, I don't like what's different today than a year ago in terms of like how
I will say I probably thought their defense this season would be a lot worse in the macro. And I was even someone to point out like, well, look at how good they are at getting set on defense and like taking their opponents out of transition. So it's like a weird space to be in where I'm not low on their future, but I definitely destroyed them for the Demonis. I'm higher, someone who likes Sabonis as a center.
You talk about destroyed. That's been my probably number one thing I've caught heat for is calling Sabonis the most overrated player in the league.
That and anything you say about the Pelicans, I feel like, but like I killed the renegotiate and extend and going back in time, but I still do it. And then just the use of cap space, but it was like, maybe they just understood that not that this would be a gap year, but this needed to be another information gathering season will prove that internally we can get better, which they did in some defensively and having the Keon Ellis stuff, the Keegan Murray bounding.
Fox was better. Fox was better defensively.
Yeah. And then like even the Keegan Murray, just the different types of shot making he can do now where he does feel a little bit more turbulent where the play-in was a perfect example where it's so in the first play-in game where he hit like 23s and then he has a down game the next. So, but that happens with 3-point variance. His offensive portfolio, it didn't do the whole, oh, look what he did in summer league. And Desmond Bane is all of a sudden like a primary initiator. It wasn't that, but he's having that is huge. But like, I feel if I'm like if I was in charge of this team, where I'm almost relieved that they didn't go out at the deadline or over the offseason to make this kind of big time swing relative to the rest of the West, but also just where they are. Now you kind of know, maybe you don't even know the type of player that you need, but at least by waiting, I think you've increased your well of options that you can go to. And now you kind of understand, all right, well, Malik Monk had this breakout season. We have his early bird rights, but is he going to get more than 4.78? And are we even going to be the team that wants to pay him that much? The Kevin Huerter regression pre-shoulder injury was real. Is he someone who's less expensive? So you just have more of this information. Not that last season was like this team won. Would they win 47, 46 games? Like that's a legit team. But I oddly feel like they're in a more complicated situation, probably because of the strength of the West in general moving forward. But I guess where I'm at now is where I thought they really needed to consolidate into that one dude. It's like, you know what, by maybe holding your powder and you have your pick now because you didn't anticipate finishing in the lottery. So that pick you go to Atlanta doesn't cumber things. Maybe it's a series of trying to hit like singles and doubles on the trade market where it's, you know, now it's not, you don't need just a wing defender because you have Keegan Murray and Keegan Ellis to help you out with that. Could you get someone like an Alex Caruso, who I would have gotten anyway? I want to be clear because he could defend some fours, but you can try these different things and there's value in that. I just don't know if that counts as enough progress, if that makes any weird sense.
Yeah, no, I think the Monk thing is, I was going to ask you like, well, I think they won 48 2 years ago and 46 this year. Like
47 is just like,
yeah, like 47 feels about right for next year. Like they're going to be in that range again, except I think Monk really matters to this team. And I think they would pay him that 4 for 78, like in a heartbeat, and would go way higher if they could. And I think someone else is going to pay him more. And now, in addition to some of the other issues you mentioned, like maybe the defense is sort of sturdier with Ellis emerging and Murray getting better. But now it's like, oh shit, we don't have shot creators after Fox and Sabonis. Like what? So now we got a new issue to solve if you lose Monk.
I think Murray he's not going to be the drive and kick stuff or drive and pass stuff, that drive and dish that Monk does. That's not really his thing, but I think he can like offset some of the shot creation that you're good. Not only just like missing from Monk, but if this is just the new Kevin Huerter, that's something to consider. So like you need Murray there. It's a weird spot. I know I said like maybe you don't consolidate, but like I'm putting everything I have on the table, absent Keegan Murray, of course. Does that get you in the Mikal Bridges discussion?
Maybe. I think Murray, like if you could get the like, so say he played 82 games. I don't know how many exactly he played, but like whatever the top 7, like the top 21 of those, like the top quarter in terms of his like usage rate and like general involvement in the offense, if that could be the baseline going forward, like he's going to get more shots. He's going to have the ball more. He's going to be involved in actions that are designed to like make him freed up to do stuff like that. Like he doesn't even need to get better. I think just the way that he's used, like just needs to be, the dial's got to turn up, because like, I think I would be almost more encouraged if his 3-point percentage went down next year because he's taking like 4 more threes a game or something like that. I think that's a way to solve some of the Monk stuff, assuming you lose him. But yeah, I just will pick the Kings to be right around this good again next year, unless something drastic changes. And like, now we know maybe that's good enough for the playoffs and maybe it's not. Like, so that's a little underwhelming. We've spent a lot of time there. San Antonio. So I'm going to try to stay away from the, like, didn't know Wemby would be the greatest thing of all time.
Can we give some kudos for saying, remember everyone watches summer league performances and we're like, look at how bad he was. And I came away from like, this might be one of the best players I've ever watched.
Well, I distinctly remember, because I was like, Dan, you've got to, like, this is the craziest thing you've ever seen. And you're like, I didn't see his good game. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
And I still agree with all that. So it's like, I saw his bad game and I left convinced that he was going to be the greatest player of all time. So correct on that. How about this though? I think some of what, I don't know, maybe fueled some Wembanyama optimism in terms of like the big picture is that the Spurs are the optimal environment for him. Like they're run better than any other organization. They've got this culture of winning. They're perfectly coached. They make all the right decisions. They get the most out of everybody. And some of the decisions we saw this organization make this year, like just put the lie to that stance on them, because the point guard stuff, the Sohan experiment, which we endorsed at the time, like, why not? Well, why not is you should have had somebody there that was capable, that you knew could handle that position. They didn't first of all, they played him at the wrong position to start the season. Zach Collins now looks like a horrible fit. And he just, I think, is going to have surgery again. I've torn labrum. don't quote me on the nature of the injury, but it's like bad to worse, bad fit, bad contract. Now he's hurt. I was wrong that I thought like the Spurs are going to set him up to succeed better than any other franchise possibly could have. And just some of those decisions were like, they actively like got in the way of Wembanyama being the best version of himself. Culturally, like in terms of like the organizational culture and like the no nonsense and the like get over yourself stuff, I think that's all still there. So that's great. But just like tactically, a lot left to be desired this year that I didn't see.
That's the thing that I missed. I thought the Jeremy Sohan experiment at point guard, even if it wasn't the answer, I thought it was going to work. And then it was just awful. And they stuck with it for so long. They're going to be tested on their willingness to pivot because Wembanyama is one of the 15 he's going to be one of the 10 to 15 best players in the league next year. You're now obligated to operate on a more immediate timeline. Mm-hmm. And are they going to be willing to do that? Their kind of ability to, like I said, pivot. And what you're sort of saying is, yeah, okay, culturally, this stuff is still there, but do they recognize that they have this alien who might be one of the best players of all time is in his prime right now? Like, where's it like ready to win right now? How do they react to that is like a question I have. And we always would have had that because of how conservative the Spurs tend to play it, but I feel less easy about that conservatism than I ever have.
Yeah, I think that's fair. All right, your turn.
The Toronto Raptors, I want to talk about whether the pick should convey or not, if they should have wanted the pick to convey or not. Okay. Our Discord members will get what that's about. I want to talk about Jakob Poeltl trade. No, I'm just dead. They'll get what that's about. So I'll do two things because they're both sort of quick. I never thought that they would trade both OG Anunoby and Pascal Siakam. That probably was, I guess, the right call. I'm looking at their roster now and I'm like, man, OG would look really nice on this team. But you wouldn't have gotten RJ and Emmanuel quickly if you don't give up OG Anunoby. I was surprised. I thought they would have gotten more for Siakam. I just never thought they would have moved both of them. Part of that, maybe I was overcorrecting for how they handled Kyle Lowry, Fred VanVleet. But so I think making that decision, ripping off the Band-Aid, did they handle it perfectly? Absolutely not. They should have made those decisions sooner, probably. The other thing that I got wrong, RJ Barrett, I was never out on him. I flip-flopped a lot. His finishing at the rim in Toronto, it feels real because I never would have. Here's what I would have gotten wrong. If you told me that he was shooting 72% at the rim over a 32-game sample size, which, by the way, is like 15% above his career average, for me to believe that it was real, and you had to tell me the team that he was on, the Raptors wouldn't have been in my top 10 guesses, just because of the way their spacing works. They did a great job of getting him kind of acting with momentum, with intention before he ever got the ball and giving him sort of those head starts. And I think he was able to shine in that. And it makes me believe that, well, if he was able to do this in some lineups that still weren't great with floor spacing, like the floor balance, what is he going to do when they eventually open it even more, as I assume they will as time goes on? So I am a believer in the utility that Barrett has on this Raptor squad. I don't think the three-point shooting is necessarily going to hold. I've been there, seen that movie. But I'm definitely was not as high as I should have been on his offensive fit.
My favorite thing, one of my favorite things I read this year was about how, like, it wasn't even like an article. It was just someone referencing, like, maybe RJ Barrett is just better because there aren't like 3 to 4 other left-handed players on the court with him all the time. And like the driving lanes he wants are not occupied by guys trying to go to the same spot. I don't think there's really anything to that, but that's my fun thing of like, you can't have too many lefties or nothing works. So they all suffer.
There's probably some validity, but I think it really, to me, just based off what I saw, and there are people who probably watched him more than I did, the momentum away from the ball feels like it had the movement away from the ball made all the difference in the world.
It's more that, but it's just funny to me to think like there might be executives out there thinking like, well, shit, we already got 2 left-handed players on the roster. This guy's really good, but we just can't do it. We all have too many lefties. All right. I have the Utah Jazz next. I think the main thing is I'm not sure I saw such a purposeful tank coming towards the end of the year because the narrative last year was they waited too long and maybe cost themselves Wembanyama and like just maybe didn't make the right assessment of the roster and then didn't pivot quickly enough when it turned out that the team was just better than they thought it was. This year was much more like the leash was way shorter on you guys are allowed to compete and then we're going to hamstring you. And injuries had a hand to play in that too. But like, I think I thought they would just do the same thing where it's like, we'll see how good the team is. And then, whatever happens and we'll tank late if we need to. It happened earlier this year. The other small thing, I really thought last year, one of my favorite things to go to in discussing like how potentially disastrous the Rudy Gobert trade was for the Wolves is that like Walker Kessler was one of the pieces they gave up. And like, there were a bunch of numbers that showed Kessler was, from a defensive impact
Oh
standpoint,
yeah.
pretty close to as good as Gobert. Don't trust tiny samples. Kessler, I do think, still is one of the better defensive bigs in the league, has a super bright future in that regard. He just wasn't nearly as good, was not like anywhere near
that just comes down to how they like limited his use, though.
Yeah,
Because
well,
he's
he
still
wasn't
like
even
one of the
starting
most
for
valuable
sure.
rim protectors statistically in the league.
Yeah. But he wasn't like I think he was 94th in defensive estimated plus minus, 94th percentile in DEPM last year. He's like his top quartile still. He's like 78th this year. His block rate actually went up, to your point. So like they just didn't use him as much. I thought Kessler had the chance to be like, no questions asked, defensive cornerstone. Is one of those, like, if you have him, your top 7 defensively with anybody else, may still get there, but didn't do that this year.
I think I remember, and I think I was talking to you about it, whereas we need to brace ourselves for like Larry Markkanen's efficiency to fall off. And I was citing some of the stuff that happened after the trade deadline last year, and like they're not going to have this traditional organizer. And they still didn't. Like, it was Colin Sexton, it was Jordan Clarkson, it was Keontae George, it was like Chris Dunn was getting minutes. But it's just like, no, like he's just going to spit out another season of shooting an astronomical clip from deep, hitting 55+% of his twos. He's this blend of like kind of a play finisher, but also a wing who can give you a little bit of creation, and he could play the 3 or the 4. And we both recognized that he deserved to win. I had SGA as my most improved player last year, but he didn't not deserve to win it. So I was just wrong at like, oh no, this is just going to translate to a situation that I think you could argue relative to how he started last year and what we saw last year was definitely not as ideal.
Yeah. Yeah.
Our final team, our favorite team, the Washington Wizards. What was I wrong about with them? This is one that I struggled on. And I think I have to go here, even though it's not going to be, I thought Jordan Poole was going to be awful there. You held out hope. You're like, oh, he's going to make an all-star team. Don't trade him for SGA.
Like, where's he going with this?
I don't think I even understood, as someone who was higher on him than the consensus, how good their 2 most important players are actually going to be. And that's Bilal Coulibaly and Denny Avdia. And I was entranced by Bilal Coulibaly coming in. The defensive polish is just there. He is disruptive. He fights. He's not like super strong looking, but he will handle some of like these bigger, burlier covers if he needs to. I like his motor in transition. And I think that he shot the 3 ball well enough to make me believe that, the driving room is going to open up and he'll get his hand a little bit more under control. And then the thing that I might have been even more wrong about, Denny Avdia, and I love Denny Avdia. I said he was one of the most underrated players in the league. He was easily their most underrated player. He entered the most improved player discussion, and there was more aggression from him inside the arc, better playmaking in those situations. Still doesn't take as many threes as you want. He's hitting them at a better clip, though, and it's also kind of who the fuck cares when he's doing everything else. And he even kind of like quietly ratcheted up his defensive workload and his performance this season. And so had they given him more offensive responsibility or this level of offensive responsibility from the jump, and I probably should, maybe I'm speaking out of turn, I really should have dug into the touches and usage numbers, but I just don't, I didn't really see that shift from him until more so the middle of the year. He might have won most improved player. Maybe the Wizards wouldn't have been good enough, but just looking at when Jalen Johnson and Scotty Barnes weren't eligible, maybe it always would have gravitated towards Tyrese Maxey, who seems like he's going to win it. Kobe White comes on, Alperen Şengün is there. And he played like this for like another 10 or 15 or 20 games. Like, he might have been my pick.
Yeah, no, I think he made a jump that was kind of like, it's not quite the Kobe White, like, is he a rotation guy on a decent team, to like, oh no, he's a starter he can be a starter on a good team. Like, I think Avdia went from like, we like a lot of the defense, we still have some questions, to he's at least a rotation guy on a good team and is trending towards like, you would start him almost any place, which is like that. Maybe that's I don't know if that's a harder leap, but it's the size is about the same. For me, it was just cool. I like, real quick, like I knew he would be inefficient. I just thought like, he's getting you 27. He's just going to go off. He's going to take he might take the most shots in the league. He's going to shoot, 33% from 3 and like 42% from the field. It would be like a vintage, like Iverson season minus the free throw attempts, where it's like, he's averaging how much? And he's like, true shooting percentage is like way below the league average. We just got all the bad and none of the good. Like, the volume wasn't there and the efficiency sure as hell wasn't there. And the defense was like criminal, basically. So
there's also, by the way, I would have bet I guess this is really the thing we got wrong. I can't believe I didn't have that. I would have bet an obscene amount of money that not all 3 of Jordan Poole, Kyle Kuzma, and Tyus Jones finished the season as Wizards.
Yep.
Especially the Kuzma, Tyus Jones one. The Poole, I looked at that contract. I'm like, okay, all of them finishing is wild. And then very quickly, Tristan Vukcevic, I feel like he's going to be good.
Might
I
be.
wasn't wrong about that because I knew nothing about him until he really
Mhm.
came into the league and started logging some minutes. It's just like, I don't know. Look at some of the spacing, some of the passing, even some nice hands and sliding his feet on defense. I don't know, man. Center of the future. That's why you traded Daniel Gafford. You knew you had Vukcevic and
Didn't need
Marvin
him.
Bagley, who people are trying to talk themselves into by the end of the year for the Wizards. Don't do that. It will only bring you pain.
Yeah, that's it, right? We did
Yeah,
it.
you want to take us out of here?
Sure. Everybody, thanks. Thanks for bearing with us as we mea culpa'd for close to 2 hours. What are we if not accountable? We've just
We are
spent
the
time
number one
highlighting.
NBA. We're the number one sports podcast on the charts right now.
And
So
especially if you filter it to accountability and willingness to admit mistakes, we're like whatever's above one, that's where we
I
are.
mean, we're off the charts if you filter it by like personability and charisma too.
Right.
So.
Well, it's like kind of across the board. It gets kind of boring to say how many different categories we're first in. But thanks for getting us there, everybody. And if you don't believe any of that, then you need to tell your friends and enemies to listen to this podcast, rate, review, subscribe, support us however you can. Join our Discord. Links for that in YouTube and podcast description. Same with our merch. I think that's going to cover it. Shouts, Frank Ntilikina. Apologies, Jared Allen.